Hello guys and gals, on this video I will be returning to the X-Files, and this is my review of the third episode I should say of season 1. It is called Squeeze, and after I think 2 opening episodes that probably fit quite nicely together as sort of a two-parter, even though they don't follow on plot-wise. I think there's a thematic sort of tie-in. Then this is the first sort of proper Monster of the Week style episode, and there's going to be many on this show, of course. So first of all, I would like to dedicate this review to Pricey or Priceless, who I know follows me on YouTube. She's one of my subscribers, and she also enjoys watching the X-Files. In fact, we watched this episode together earlier online, which was a lot of fun. So the review goes out to you, Priceless. Thanks for the support. So this episode is directed by Harry Longstreet, I think it is. Yeah, because I originally put Longstuff, which is pretty funny. Harry Longstreet. Not sure if he directed many episodes, but he is behind the camera for this one. And the writers, I think, are actually more notable because you have Glenn Morgan and James Wong doing the script for this one, and they're two of the big writers when it comes to X-Files episodes. I think a lot of times when you have a really strong episode, you wouldn't be surprised if their names are on it. I think they're two of the best writers of the show. Some of the best episodes definitely are penned by them. So yeah, having them as the writers is quite a big thing. And it's also quite unique because the monster of the week in this, the sort of villain in question, actually is the first one to have 2 appearances on the show. He does appear again in a later episode, which I won't spoil too much about. I certainly won't mention what happens in that episode, but he actually survives in this episode, although he does get contained at the end, but he's still alive, and he's the first monster of the week and one of the few to actually make 2 appearances, so that's worth sort of flagging up. And that is, of course, Eugene Toombs. So the plot of the episode is then Eugene Toombs, played by Doug Hutchinson, who one of those character actors you sort of seen about, I think. He basically has the ability to squeeze himself, as the title suggests, into really cramped and small spaces. So he's able to crawl into people's buildings or apartments or into a room, whatever it is, through really tight spaces, like maybe something like a chimney or like an elevator type shaft or like a vent, and attack them that way and kill them. And he's got these really creepy, scary looking fluorescent style eyes, and he essentially feeds off them and kills them. And he is like the monster of the piece. We see an opening scene with an office worker getting killed at Toombs' hands, although we don't actually see who it is in the first scene. We don't actually see the person, or the thing I should say, committing the crime, because there is, of course, supernatural origins. But then what happens is an old friend of Dana's, Tom Fulton, I think his name is, or Colton, who's played by Donald Long or Lounge, or however you say his surname. And another familiar face, and actually I'll give props to Pricey on this one because she pointed out then he was in Gotham, and amongst other things, I certainly recognised his face, but yeah, apparently for fans of Gotham, he's in that. Obviously, a much later role. This is way before Gotham and the early 90s, so he's very young. But he plays this old friend of Scully who she knew from like the academy. They were trained together, and he now has a case for her, and it is this case, and on the surface of it, he obviously thinks it's just a regular like murder case, but at the same time there is kind of like an ambiguity to it, something that can't be explained or which he's not sure about, and that is of course the point of entry, because seemingly there's no way the killer could have got in, because the place was like locked and all that, and there didn't seem to be any entry points for someone to physically get in and kill. Obviously they don't know about Toombs' unique ability, so he takes it to Scully, and she kind of talks him into letting Mulder come on board, and they investigate it together. And Tom's very suspicious of this. He's heard about Mulder and he's very down on him. But that's kind of the setup, and along the way there's sort of like a clash between Mulder and Fulton, or Colton, sorry, as they're investigating the case. And on the one hand, they're trying to they're following like a regular criminal type case, thinking it's obviously a logical sort of explanation, but at the same time Mulder's trying to push obviously the supernatural angle, and he starts digging into like the past, and starts finding out about this particular like demon who dates back over 100 years, and he starts to suspect it might be Toombs, or well, he gets the name of Toombs later, but he starts to suspect then, because he knows he can, like, the demon can manipulate himself into tight spaces, then that's what the answer is. So that's the setup, and it's a really strong episode. This is the best episode so far, and I think one of the best of this season. It's been a while since I've watched season 1, but I would probably be surprised if there's many better than this in season 1. As I said, the guest cast is pretty impressive. I think Doug Hutchinson has real presence as Toombs. He's very eerie. He really knows how to get under your skin. Also, I think the direction is really on point in this. I think, like a lot of great X-Files episodes, it's truly very creepy and unnerving. And I think because to a certain extent you kind of know generally how the plot is going to play out. Obviously there's some surprises, and there are actually in this episode some surprises. So I don't mean it in a demeaning way, but I think to a large extent you know roughly how an X-Files episode is going to pan out. But this is, like, at times a full-on horror one, and it's really very sort of unnerving, freak of the week type episode. One thing I think is really cool actually is that Toombs actually has like almost like a theme, like bit of music of his own. There's this really eerie atmospheric sort of. It's almost more of a sound effect than a bit of music, and it's when he's in like the facility and it's letting you know that he's sort of about to attack someone, and you just hear this kind of like scraping almost, or this sort of, I don't know, it sort of has this metallic style effect, but very sort of slippery and gets under your skin quite a bit. And yeah, I really like the plot. I think this is a very unique sort of like monster of the week, and it's a great idea for them to come up with because it really gives them a lot of different things to play with. And I think Hutchinson is so good as Toombs partly because he has a very kind of innocent baby like face at times. I think he's able to put on the appearance of being someone very normal, but there's darkness lurking. So, because his sort of job, which is obviously part of his cover, is that he is like a bug man, basically. And it's funny because they referred to him at one point as a civil servant, so that sort of means that that role is very different in the US than it is in the UK. So, but yeah, I do like that sort of persona he has, where he's able to like come across as quite sort of vulnerable and naive, innocent, but there's obviously like this menace to him lurking underneath. And slowly throughout the episode, he obviously goes through the gears, and is when he needs to be is totally terrifying. But I think also without obviously like meaning to necessarily engage with him, he's a complete psychopath, but there is something sort of disturbed about him that does make him kind of vulnerable. So I think on some levels, you, as creepy as he is, I think you do kind of empathize with him, which maybe is scary in itself, but yeah, the actor does a really good job, because obviously if you didn't have a good actor, I think it would yeah, maybe falter a little bit, the episode. I also like the whole backstory with him, the fact that he supposedly dates back to 100 years ago, the fact that he kind of has this really weird sort of what they call a nest, where they track him down later in the episode. So he's got like an official sort of an address, but where he normally sleeps and hangs out is actually like in the sort of like basement of this place. And Mulder comes up with this theory, well, he doesn't sleep here so much as hibernates. So we get into like this mythology that this creature, Toombs, actually comes out every now and again, every so often. I can't remember exactly the timeline, but he only comes out once in a while. He feeds off people, and then he goes back and hibernates, basically. So we get into that stuff, but I also like then there is something about this mystery where it could be played both ways, where you could read logical things into it, but the nature of it makes it very hard for Mulder to prove what this guy is. And again, Scully's very balanced in the episode, because at one point they arrest him because they find him in like a parking garage late at night, and he's like climbing up into a vent or something like that. And I do like, actually, because later on when when the detectives like stick up for him, saying, well, he was a civil servant doing his job sort of thing, and we're busting him. I like the fact that Scully points out, well, he was actually crawling through a vent in the middle of the night, which is kind of odd. So even though she doesn't necessarily buy into Mulder's theory about tombs, she does take this seriously and wants to investigate properly, and she is suspicious herself about what Tombs is up to. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in the episode, and I like the stuff with Colton and Scully, because I think this early in the series, obviously Scully is still getting used to Mulder, or still kind of on the fence about him. I think you can see that they do have a rapport, but then she still has her doubts about him and about the X-Files. So I think meeting back up with Colton, and they have lunch, and he obviously brings her this case, I think it kind of represents like Scully's path, or what could have been her path sort of thing. So this guy, I mean, I don't know if they were meant to like be lovers in the past, or whether it was just friends and stuff, but he kind of represents the path she could have travelled, and he is like this sort of thing tugging her back towards that way of things, and saying, oh no, Mulder's no good, he's a nut job, because throughout Mulder's kind of being mocked, and it again plants more seeds that he is like this sort of underdog, this outcast that we're going to be rooting for. And credit to Scully, because she never mocks him openly. She does defend Mulder a lot, but it's an interesting thing that, again, this is kind of the path Scully could have ended up. She could have been doing a similar sort of job to fault Colton, basically. So I think that's something that happens a lot in these sorts of shows. Obviously, a similar thing happens on Buffy, where you kind of get the contrast with her and Cordelia, and the fact that obviously Buffy was quite similar to Cordelia in the path. You also have her like exploring, going to a darker side, like the stuff with Faith, and obviously more so Spike. So it's something to, obviously this is a different sort of plot, but it reminds me a little bit of that. But yeah, I do like Scully like defending Mulder, especially as the episode goes on, and Colton's just a complete dick, and you can almost tell that from the start. But I like his involvement because it leads to some quite juicy stuff, and it leads to some good character beats for Scully, I think. But there's some good back and forth with Mulder, because I like Mulder, first of all, saying to Scully at one point, because when she mentions about them bringing them the case, and the fact that they kind of don't want Mulder involved, he says, they think I'm spooky. Do you think I'm spooky? to Scully. And the zinger, like in the next scene, is that when Mulder meets Colton, I keep saying Fulton, don't I? But he corrects him, saying little green men, because Colton actually calls them little grey men, so of course Fox corrects him, which, to be fair, anyone would do. I don't think you have to be much of a nerd to really correct someone on that. It's pretty basic stuff, really. Anyone should know that. But there is a lot of great dialogue in this episode. It's all very sharp. Let's see what else. So there's a scene where they obviously arrest Toombs, and they put him on a lie detector, and obviously Fox has got this theory about him and his origins, so he does put in like these questions that they're kind of like, what the hell, because it's questions like, first of all, I do love the questions in general, because there's a question where it's like, do you enjoy eating people's liver? And I mean, I know obviously he does, because that's what he is, but it's just funny, the thought of being asked that on a lie detector test. But Fox like slips in some of his own questions, like, oh, are you over 100 years old? And he mentions something to do with the 1930s, were you around then or something, or did you? I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was to do with the 1930s anyway. And the only slip up Toombs has on the test is that he slips up on like the 100 years credit. Are you over 100 years old? And the like Colton and the other guy rationally sticks up for Toombs in a way, because he says, well, to be fair, I had a reaction from that question. And even though they're kind of being quite dickish about it, I think that's the one moment where you think, well, okay, you can see where they're coming from. But they are really rude to Mulder and quite nasty about it, even though you might say they have a point. But of course Toombs gets released because they don't really have anything on him, or certainly not enough. And he goes off to find his next victim. I will say, yeah, as I've already mentioned them a bit, but like those sorts of scenes where he's like crawling into like air vents and going into people's houses, or like the opening scene where it's like an office at night, they're so well directed. They are really suspenseful, tense scenes, and just some great visual choices. So in the scene where he goes after this family at their house, we get a shot from the outside, so see him outside looking in, and he's got like those scary, as I said, fluorescent eyes. And then one of the most iconic shots is him looking down, or like putting his arm through the trim lead. So I guess he must be feeling, just making sure he's not like lighting a fire. So it actually shows that he's very smart as well, Toombs. But yeah, you get like a shot from below, and you get to see him stretching his arm, so we can see he can make his arm stretch really far, like abnormally far. So that's a great shot. That's one of those shots you see a lot. And there's another iconic shot in this episode, which is actually Mulder and Scully like bursting through the door and going into the darkness, and that's in Toombs' like apartment, them coming in with like a flashlight and guns, and they actually use that on the opening credits. So that's really cool. That's one of those iconic images. But yeah, these moments of horror in the episode are really well directed, really tense atmosphere. As I said, Toombs has his own sort of theme music in a way. Well, theme music isn't the right term, but he has his own sort of mood music, which kind of puts you on edge. But yeah, I really like the opening kill with him like getting hold of this guy, and we just see like blood dripping from the chair. But they do a good job in like building up to the monster, I think. But yeah, getting back to some of the lines, I really like a line with Colton and Mulder where where he tries to stop Mulder from like being a part of the crime scene, and this is where he's just getting all like macho and territorial and just overstepping his mark, really, just because he's got an issue with Mulder. So Mulder's like, "What's the matter, Tom? You worry that I'm going to solve your case?" And I do. This is the scene where Scully basically calls Tom out on his bullshit, and he's like, "Whose side are you on?" And she's like, "I'm on the victim side." So again, that's another good character beat for Scully, because it sells you on her basically doing the right thing, or that she's in this for the right reason. She actually cares. She wants justice done. So you kind of have Colton and I guess Mulder to a lesser extent, although he obviously is a good guy, but certainly Colton having this sort of pissing contest, or trying to, with Mulder, and Scully just calls him out on it, and no, this is the deal. We should be trying to get justice. I'm looking out for the victim. It's not about what side I'm on between you. That's not what the deal is. And Scully actually does have the best line in the episode, which is later, because Colton, sorry, I keep saying Fulton, basically abuses his power and tries to have Mulder thrown off the case. Because Mulder's like sets up like a sting type operation to like stake out Toombs's apartment, and Colton like calls those cops off and tries to kind of muscle in and get Mulder like thrown off the case. And so Scully like says, "Is this what it takes to climb to the top of the ladder?" And Colton's like, "Well, anything it takes." And so then Scully's like, "Well, in that case, I hope, I look forward," or it's something like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait till you fall off and straight on your ass." It's a great line, and it's like, yeah, that's like the punch your head type moment. So Scully definitely has the best line, the way she sticks it to Tom, and yeah, she's spot on. You can't really disagree with her on that front. It's a great line. And Mulder also has a great line like anti-Waltons, which is really funny when they're talking about Toombs and his whole sort of style of attacking. But yeah, it comes down to Toombs going after Scully like in her own home, because they still haven't got him, and he gets into Scully's house, attacks her, and Mulder comes and basically saves her. He arrests Toombs, and they take him off to a mental institute, basically. But there's like this really eerie like ending where they look into his cell, and he's appears to be creating a nest, because he's like ripping up all these bits of newspaper, and it ends with a eerie shot of him staring out with those green eyes again, and he's got like this sinister, sadistic sort of smile. But yeah, it's really good stuff. I really like this episode. It's very strong, well cast, very tense, and you've got an interesting monster of the week. And I think ultimately that's gonna decide a lot of the quality of these episodes, a lot of the X-Files episodes will depend on how interesting the monster of the week is, if you've got a good actor in there. And this one pretty much does that. It's a really engrossing watch, and very scary, as I said. Some good character beats too, like for Scully particularly, I think, in this one. So really strong stuff. So I'm gonna give this episode an 8 out of 10. I think it's as I said, it's very strong. It holds up really well because I remember it being a good episode. But yeah, I maybe didn't think it was this good, as good as it seemed to be when I rewatched it tonight. So great stuff. It's one worth checking out because the first season is very inconsistent, but this one definitely stands out as one of the highlights. So that's my thoughts on Screes. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you agree with me on the episode, or alternatively, maybe you're a bit more down on the episode or not quite as enthusiastic as I am. All thoughts are welcome, of course. Let me know, and let me know what you think of Toombs as like a monster of the week. So yeah, that's my review of the latest X-Files, or the third X-Files in season 1, and I'll return hopefully sometime next week. I'll keep these going with my thoughts on episode 4, and that's called Conduit, I want to say, something like that, which I remember not being so good, but who knows, it might surprise me. So you can expect my review of that coming up next week. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. I guess just thinking of this sort of review and show, if you're interested in kind of cult TV from the 90s, another one you might want to check out, which I'm reviewing at the moment, is of course Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because bored now, that's where my username comes from. But yeah, I've been making my way through Buffy, and I'm currently on season 2. The next episode I'm set to review is Ted from season 2. Not quite sure when I'll get to it yet, but hopefully it won't be too long. But if you enjoy the X-Files, I guess there's a decent chance you might enjoy Buffy as well. So check out those reviews on the channel as well if you are a fan. But I'll be back with more X-Files soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.